You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it, and it goes down smooth. Hey!
Spanning the continent to bring you the truth about cannabis and marijuana law reform.
I smoke pot and I like it a lot.
The Russ Belville Show, the voice of the marijuana nation. Now, here's your host, Radical Russ Belville.
Good day, tokers and tokettes and non-toking lovers of liberty. It is Wednesday, February 25th, 2015, and it's got to be 420 somewhere in the world. So glad you could be with us here today. Hope you're relaxed and sitting back and ready to enjoy 2 hours of news, interviews, information, opinion, rants, music, and more by, for, and about the cannabis community. We do this every weekday, Monday through Friday, 3 p.m. Pacific time, with replays at 6 p.m. But I do need to warn you, tomorrow and Friday, we will not have our regularly scheduled live programs. I know, it's a shame. But the reason why is very legitimate. I'm headed out in my position as the executive director of Portland NORML to the Oregon Liquor Control Commission's listening sessions on marijuana legalization. These are taking place at Tigard, which is a suburb of Portland, just south of here, and Clackamas as well on Friday. And they've been conducting these listening tours all across the state. The Eastern Oregonians and the Southern Oregonians have weighed in on the measure. Time for those of us in the Portland area, those of us who supported this measure, well over 70% of the vote, to get our voices heard. So we're going to be there with Portland NORML, handing out Freedom Leaf magazines and our flyer and brochure on marijuana legalization, trying to drum up some membership and some awareness of the will of the people with respect to marijuana legalization, which leads me to our rant for today. In the Radical Rant, we're going to talk about the arrogance of Oregon legislators who don't seem to understand that more people voted for legal marijuana than voted for any of them. And they want to tinker with this amendment, or this initiative, I should say. We're going to tell you all about that in the Radical Rant today at the end of the show. Before that, we've got a chance for an interview with Cannabusiness Chronicles. Pat Oglesby from newrevenue.org will be joining us to talk about state and federal proposed marijuana taxes, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Also on the show today, we'll have time for a bonus mini Radical Rant. That's right. Since I'm off the air for 2 days coming up here, I decided to give you twice the rants for today. A little mini Radical Rant. Having trouble talking today. A terrible story coming out of Brooklyn that we want to tell you about, so stay tuned for that. Also coming up on the show today, behind the headlines, the trial of the Kettle Falls 5 began today, although now I guess technically it's the Kettle Falls 4. We'll tell you why right after the 420 radio news. And in the headlines today, Initiative 71, the legalization in Washington, D.C., is set to go into effect tonight after midnight. We've got a look at the Caribbean island of Jamaica, where the parliament has finally done the final approvals of marijuana decriminalization, not just possession, but also cultivation. We've got a medical marijuana bill in Georgia that made its way almost unanimously through the state house today. Also, in Utah, a medical marijuana law has been proposed. Yes, folks, in Utah, a medical marijuana law has been proposed, the first time it's ever been proposed in the Beehive State. And a Republican New Jersey Assemblywoman is marshaling forces to fight against the inevitable tide of marijuana legalization. We'll tell you all about that in the 420 radio news. And then stay tuned for Hour 2, Toker Talk Radio. We'll take your calls at 971-533-7111. We'll also talk about more marijuana news of the day, the upcoming inaugural meeting of Portland NORML on Saturday, and we've got some daily Toker tunes for our Irie Wednesday, a little flashback from Gordon Green's Music Planet for you. All that coming up on the Russ Belville Show. Stay tuned, sit back, light one up. We'll be right back after these advertising messages.
You're tuned into the Russ Belville Show, the voice of the marijuana nation.
420 Radio, the activist radio station. This is Radical Russ encouraging you to take a look at the Weed Blog every day. Johnny Green and the staff at the Weed Blog are on top of all the latest developments in the fight to end marijuana prohibition nationwide. You can even get the Weed Blog on your smartphone by installing the Weed Blog app for iPhone and Android. If it's about weed, it's on the Weed Blog, including my original writing. So don't delay. Read the Weed Blog today. Connect with 420radio.org through social media, on Twitter at 420radio.org, and our Facebook page at 420radio.org. Follow us and like us today. You'll be glad you did. Oregon has joined Washington and Colorado in legalizing marijuana. We're Portland NORML, the national organization for the reform of marijuana laws chapter in Portland, Oregon. Join us as we celebrate the launch of an exciting new era in marijuana freedom in Oregon. Our job has just begun. Powerful interests want to white out the most important portions of Oregon's legalization law. By joining Portland NORML, you add your voice to the thousands who voted for Measure 91 and want it to be implemented as written. The people have spoken. Now it is time for the legislature to obey the will of the people. Find out more about Portland NORML at portlandnormal.org. Attend our monthly membership meetings on the fourth Saturday of the month. See our website for more details. Portland NORML, ensuring responsible adult marijuana consumers are afforded the same rights, privileges, and responsibilities as beer drinkers. It's time for the 420 Radio News, covering the latest headlines in consumer cannabis, medical marijuana, and industrial hemp. Transcripts of 420 Radio News are available daily on our website at 420radio.org. Now, here's Russ Belville with your marijuana headlines in 4 minutes and 20 seconds.
This is your 420 Radio News for Wednesday, February 25th, 2015. Initiative 71, a ballot measure approved by Washington, D.C. voters in November, is set to take effect at 12:01 a.m. Thursday at the conclusion of a congressional review period required of all D.C. laws. While some Republicans on Capitol Hill have taken the legal stance that federal legislation enacted in December blocks Initiative 71 from taking effect, D.C. lawmakers believe nothing will prevent it from becoming law. Initiative 71 will make it legal for people 21 and older to possess up to 2 ounces of marijuana for recreational use, grow up to 6 marijuana plants inside a D.C. residence, and to transfer up to 1 ounce of marijuana to others. D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser said she will seek to restrict the operation of so-called cannabis clubs, private organizations that would facilitate the open exchange of marijuana through memberships. Buying and selling marijuana is still prohibited. Jamaica's parliament on Tuesday night gave final approval to an act decriminalizing small amounts of pot and establishing a licensing agency to regulate a lawful medical marijuana industry. The historic amendments paved the way for a cannabis licensing authority to be established to deal with regulating the cultivation and distribution of marijuana for medical and scientific purposes. And in a victory for religious freedom, adherents of the homegrown Rastafari spiritual movement can now freely use marijuana for sacramental purposes for the first time on the tropical island. The law makes possession of up to 2 ounces of marijuana a petty offense that could result in a ticket, but not in a criminal record. Cultivation of 5 or fewer plants on any premise would be permitted. Tourists who are prescribed medical marijuana abroad will soon be able to apply for permits authorizing them to legally buy small amounts of Jamaican weed. Legislation making it legal to possess medical marijuana in Georgia breezed through the State House on Wednesday, setting up a potential confrontation with the Senate. House Bill 1, sponsored by Representative Alan Peake, a Republican of Macon, passed the House 157-2. The bill was first amended, however, to add sickle cell disease back into the list of disorders that could qualify a patient to use the drug. The amendment came after the Atlanta Journal-Constitution reported that sickle cell had been deleted over the objections of many African-American lawmakers. Qualified seizure disorders under the bill are cancer, Crohn's disease, multiple sclerosis, and Lou Gehrig's disease, or amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, among others. Peake told reporters after the vote that he hopes the Senate quickly passes the bill as written and sends it to Governor Nathan Deal's desk. His fear, however, is that the Senate instead will strip every disorder except childhood seizure disorder from the bill. In Utah, newly released legislation would establish a network of marijuana greenhouses and medical dispensaries, all licensed by the state, the first time such a plan has been proposed. Under Senate Bill 259, sponsored by Republican State Senator Mark Madsen, businesses could apply for licenses to grow cannabis under the supervision of the state. Individuals with chronic illnesses could purchase and use small amounts, not more than 2 ounces at a time, of cannabis oils and edibles containing tetrahydrocannabinol, or THC, the active ingredient in marijuana. There would be a $100 fee to obtain a registration card from the state. The bill is scheduled for a public hearing in the Senate Judiciary Committee, of which Madsen is chairman, Thursday morning. Madsen's bill will face an uphill battle not solely because of Utah's conservative anti-drug legislature, but because of opposition from Governor Gary Herbert, who called medical marijuana, quote, a sham being used for recreational purposes. Republican New Jersey Assemblywoman Mary Pat Angelini said she is working with other anti-marijuana activists to form an advocacy group in response to the official launch of New Jersey United for Marijuana Reform in Newark last week. Angelini said that some of her group's arguments will include health and incarceration statistics about marijuana users and questions about additional costs that might be incurred as a result of legalization. She cited the state's alcohol tax as an example that brings in revenue that is outweighed by law enforcement and healthcare costs to the state. However, Angelini didn't specify any social costs in Washington or Colorado that exceed the tens of millions of dollars in pot tax revenue raised in those two legal states. This has been your 420 Radio News for Wednesday, February 25th, 2015. I'm Russ Belville.
.420 Radio, the home of marijuana experts. Get your tickets now for the Oregon Medical Marijuana Business Conference March 15th and 16th at the Hilton in Eugene, Oregon, powered by MarijuanaPolitics.com. Former presidential candidate and two-term New Mexico Governor Gary Johnson will deliver the keynote address. Harborside Health Center's Steve D'Angelo will present at the pre-conference VIP reception. You'll also hear from State Senator Floyd Przanski, New Approach Oregon's Anthony Johnson, Oregon marijuana attorneys Paul Loney and Leland Berger, and Oregon Liquor Control Commission's Director of Marijuana Programs, Tom Burns. Get your tickets at early bird pricing by acting now. Learn more at the Oregon Medical Marijuana Business Conference at ommbc.com. This conference will provide you with a head start for success in the expanding Oregon marijuana industry. Get your tickets today at ommbc.com.
Tokers, there's no good reason to get your dog stoned. While it might not harm them physically, imagine being a dog who already begs for treats all day, and then imagine that dog having the munchies.
With over 1 billion people in the world, chances are there's somebody out there just like you. There are software engineers, pastry chefs, artists, and people with medical conditions. And what do many of these people have in common? They use marijuana. It's expected that marijuana will be legalized in California. And when that happens, what will be the biggest concern? Safety. That's where we come in. High Def Transit is a discreet shuttle service that also serves as a mobile vapor room. Members can medicate on board, while our certified drivers get you to your destination safely, so you can enjoy the ride. So hop in, make friends, and ride safe. High Def Transit.
Welcome back, everybody. Time to go behind the headlines, where today the federal trial of the Kettle Falls Four has begun. 3 family members and a close friend who are charged with illegal possession and distribution of medical marijuana. If convicted, they face minimum mandatory sentences of 10 years in prison. Those charged include Rhonda Firestack Harvey, she's age 55, her son, Roland Gregg, age 33, Roland's wife, Michelle, age 35, and a close family friend, Jason Zucker, age 38. They grew marijuana on the property of their home in northeastern Washington. Rhonda's husband, Larry, also was originally charged. This is a case that was called the Kettle Falls Five, but just a couple of days ago, actually it was last week, the government dropped all charges against Larry Harvey because he's 71 years old and has stage 4 pancreatic cancer. So apparently the other folks are healthy enough to prosecute and to threaten with 10-year prison sentences, but once you get pancreatic cancer and are facing 3 to 6 months to live, I guess the crime isn't that big a deal anymore. And it's a very frustrating case in that, as a federal case, the defendants are not allowed to put forth any information to the jury that they are medical marijuana patients, that they are sick in any way, that they were obeying Washington state law. These folks were found to have been growing 74 marijuana plants. In Washington state, a legal medical marijuana patient, of which all 5 of these people were, keep that in mind, a legal patient can cultivate up to 15 plants. 15 times 5 people, that's 75 plants. They were 1 plant under that. Now, when the cops first showed up, the Washington police treated them as a collective. Now, under Washington laws, as a collective, you can cultivate 45 plants. So they seized 29 of the plants. They seized just enough plants to get the Harveys underneath that limit of 45, which to me says that, as according to the Washington State Police, they understood these people were medical marijuana patients, that they were growing within their rights. There's a quibble as to whether they were 5 individuals with 15 plants each or 1 collective with 45 plants total. But there was no doubt about the fact that these people were medical marijuana patients trying to obey the law. But later, the federal authorities came back, conducted another raid, and this time hauled them off and charged them with multiple federal counts: cultivation, distribution, and firearms charges, use of a firearm on the commission of a drug felony, which is related to the fact that they had hunting weapons and self-defense weapons in this rural northeastern Washington home, like many people in rural northeastern Washington have. So the trial goes forth. It starts today. And if you're wondering about the spending bill, there was a spending bill that was passed by the federal Congress that prohibited the Department of Justice, and that would include the DEA, that prohibited the Department of Justice from spending any money to go after and prosecute people involved in legal state medical marijuana programs. This was something that the attorneys for the Harveys brought up as well, but the judge in this case, Thomas O. Rice, threw that motion out, saying that this did not apply to this particular case, as these raids happened in 2012. Now, I think this is something that, depending on how the case goes, if it goes badly for the defendants, is something that would be brought up on appeal. The government is clearly spending money here, contrary to the spending prohibition that was enacted by the Congress. And this is one area where, and this will play into the rant that I'm doing later on in the show as well, but this reticence by our elected officials at state, local, even the federal level, to recognize the will of the people on the issue of marijuana. It's clear that the people of the state of Washington not only don't want any prosecution of patients like these who are engaged in medical marijuana, but the people of Washington state have legalized recreational marijuana. If the federal government's making the case that these are some kind of marijuana kingpins for their 74 plant medical grow, they need to start explaining why they've got farms in Prosser, Washington that are pumping out 10,000 marijuana plants, and the federal government isn't doing a thing about those. So this is clearly a selective prosecution, and the people of the state of Washington don't want it for medical or recreational purposes. And as I mentioned earlier, the federal Congress has passed that amendment that says that you can't spend any money going after these state legal medical marijuana programs. We have numerous memos from the Department of Justice saying it's not in their interest to go after these small fish when there's so many big fish in the sea to go after, and that it's not a wise use of the federal resources to prosecute these people. President Obama was elected and re-elected and has continually promised that it is not in his administration's best interests to be going after these people that are obeying medical marijuana laws, and yet The prosecution continues. The prosecution began today and it continues. And the only hope for the Kettle Falls Four at this point, since they were clearly breaking federal law, is to hope that that jury understands that what's going on here is a travesty of justice and that they use their power of jury nullification to end this travesty.
Oh, I could have smoked that pot.
All right, folks, time to take a break. It's 4:20 in the Mountain Time Zone. That means there's a nice haze rising over the state of Colorado right now. But you know what? It's rising all over this nation and all over the world as people recognize that marijuana is not just safer than alcohol, it's the safest recreational substance out there. Hey, it was in the papers. Don't believe me. We're back right after this.
420 Radio, fighting prohibition since 2012. Get.Buzz. .Buzz is the internet platform that fuels community interest, excitement, and new experiences. .Buzz is the premier online destination for internet users seeking the latest news on a variety of topics. .Buzz appeals to groups active in blogging, communications, journalism, advertising, and marketing. .Buzz offers registrants a stronger alternative to the shrinking namespace of existing top-level domain names, such as .com, .net, and .org. Get your name now at get.buzz.
Oh man, I really dig this tune. You should really check out this groove.
Cool. Groovy.
Hey, check out more deep cuts like this on my show, Big Daddy Fink's Funky Roller Rink, every Thursday night on 420 Radio. Funky Roller Rink.
Are you in the market for portable vaporizers now? Get online to vapes.buzz, the quick and easy link to portablevaporizers.now.com. Vapes.buzz has everything you are looking for, including vape pens, herbal vaporizers, e-juice, parts, accessories, and more. Visit vapes.buzz and use promo code 420radio to get 10% off your online purchase, or just give them a call at 866-264-2415. Vapes.buzz. Get vaping, baby!
We must wage what I have called total war against public enemy number one.
I support a change in law to end federal criminal penalties for possession of up to 1 ounce of marijuana.
That marijuana, pot, grass, whatever you want to call it, is probably the most dangerous drug.
Some think there won't be room for them in jail. We'll make room.
I experimented with marijuana a time or two, and I didn't like it and didn't inhale.
And one major responsibility is to encourage people to use less drugs.
Entirely legitimate topic for debate.
Radical Rant.
Welcome back, everyone, for this little mini rant that I'm going to add on today's show. So many people sent me a link to this story coming out of Brooklyn that I just had to comment on it. The story involves a man named Arthur Mondella, age 57, who is the owner of a maraschino cherry factory in Brooklyn, New York. Those big red, colorful cherries, right? He was supplying major industries as well. He was supplying major players in the restaurant industry like Chick-fil-A, Red Lobster, and so on. So his company was making maraschino cherries, and there was a search that was conducted because there was some rumor that he was involved with a marijuana grow in some sort of way. So the cops tried to get a warrant for this guy's place, could not get a warrant. They didn't have any probable cause. There were some folks that had said they could every now and then smell a faint odor of marijuana, but there was not enough to convince a judge to get a warrant. So instead of getting a warrant for a criminal activity, they went to the Department of Environmental Protection in New York, kind of a EPA at the New York level, right? And issued these administrative warrants for environmental inspections of the factory. Now, there was some precedent for this. There was complaints in the past that this guy was releasing syrup from the factory into the waters around the area, and local bees were turning red from the dye, the maraschino cherry juice. So there was, some flimsy little reason for having this administrative warrant. They go down to this guy's factory, and he's kind of nervous while everybody's looking around the factory. And soon enough, these inspectors found this wall where there was some shelving that was up there with just magnets. It seemed really flimsy. And in this wall, it was a false wall. And they found that it moved aside. And when they moved this false wall aside, the guy had carved out like a cave and had this massive marijuana grow going on. It had like 3 bags, like 80 pounds of marijuana they found, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars. While these guys were first looking at the false wall, Arthur Mandela excuses himself to go to the bathroom, locks himself in the bathroom, yells out to his sister, "Take care of my kids," and then shoots himself in the head, commits suicide. Wow. And my first thought when this story went down was, marijuana ain't child pornography, dude. It's not like they uncovered a false wall and you're like the guy who kidnapped Elizabeth Smart. You got some sort of dungeon there with, kids in chains being used for sexual purposes or something. It's a marijuana grow. And to think that our laws are still so punitive and our treatment of marijuana consumers and producers and sellers is so vicious that someone would feel they'd need to kill themselves over this. The police couldn't believe it either. They said, well, there has to be something else. There's got to be some other reason. Nobody kills himself over pot. Well, yes, they do. Obviously, they do. This guy realizes that his business could be seized. He realizes he could be facing mandatory minimums in prison. He's 57 years old. You put him in for a 10-year mandatory. That's a long time when you're that old. Now, he leaves behind an ex-wife and a toddler daughter, unfortunately. But the cops who can't believe that someone would kill themselves over this really need to take a look at how they're treating people, especially in New York, where it's the marijuana arrest capital of the world. Even still, despite the dramatic declines they've seen, over 30,000 arrests per year in New York City. I am not surprised this guy committed suicide. I'm just saddened to think that this guy had to go to Breaking Bad levels of, Pollos Hermanos levels here of hiding his marijuana grow inside a maraschino cherry factory, when we've got thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of square foot legal grows going on in Denver, going on in Seattle, and all across those 2 states, and soon to be expanding to Alaska and Oregon. And we've got places in 23 states now, most of those 23 states, where people are cultivating marijuana. It's either being done for the dispensaries or people are doing it for themselves. And this guy felt like he had to commit suicide. Couldn't run both his family business of the cherry factory and the actual profitable business of growing marijuana at the same time. It's a shame that he couldn't have sold the factory and moved out west and become legal like the rest of us. But it's a bigger shame that people should have to move and leave their families and leave their family businesses in order to be legal and participate in one of the few growth industries that we have left in this country. It's a sad day for the family of Arthur Mandela and people that worked with him, and neighbors said he was a wonderful man and very helpful in times of need. But another person who's been brought down because of the prohibition of marijuana. 420 Radio, your ticket to the Boston Freedom Rally.
Because he had a big habit.
The law offices of Omar Figueroa would like to remind you to stand up for your rights. If you are detained or arrested, treat law enforcement with respect and stand up for your rights by repeating, "I respectfully invoke all of my legal and constitutional rights. I do not consent to any search and seizure. I want to remain silent, and I want to speak with my attorney." Please contact the law offices of Omar Figueroa at 415-489-0420 or 707-829-0215 or on the web at omarfigueroa.com.
NORMAL stands for responsible adult cannabis use. If cannabis use is causing problems in your life, consider taking a break or seeking medical assistance. Consider ceasing cannabis use if you have a family history of mental illness. Don't drive or operate heavy machinery while impaired by cannabis use. Cannabis use is not without risks, even though the risks may be far less than those posed by legal drugs.
Growing plants indoors can be a rewarding hobby, but electricity bills can go through the roof. Then you have to cool down all those big hot lights. It can drive a grower insane. With Lush LED lighting, you can solve many of these issues and double your rewards. Matt and his scientists have developed the perfect light for flowering plants with far less cost and heat. And the results? Very effective. Check out lushledlighting.com right now and tell them Radical Russ sent you. Mark Twain once said that when there's a gold rush, it's a good time to be in the pick and shovel business. Today we look at the rapidly evolving markets in the marijuana green rush in our Cannabusiness Chronicles.
All right, welcome back, everyone. Half past the hour. Time for us to take a look at the Cannabusiness Chronicles. And today, like we did yesterday, we're going to talk about taxes. And joining us to discuss the issue, we have Pat Oglesby. He's with newrevenue.org. Pat, welcome back to the show. Glad to have you.
Russ, thank you, and I appreciate your show. Golly, I didn't know about that Brooklyn guy committing suicide. That's a terrible story. That's just
it's unfortunate to have to pass these stories along to people, but it's part of the reason why we do what we do, ending this criminal prohibition so we can, really save lives. It's not the marijuana that kills people; it's the prohibition that does.
Well, I appreciate your thoughtful approach to the issues. And
thanks so much, Pat.
And thanks for having me.
Oh, it's great to have you here. Now, you're out of North Carolina. Tell folks about the organization that you're working with there.
Well, it's a tax policy organization and looking at various tax issues, and in particular at marijuana taxes and whether it should be taxed and how much and how, whether it should be weight or price or potency or square feet, and then what are the mistakes that people can make at the writing laws at trying to help folks just think about what kind of tax laws make sense.
Well, so far what we've gotten in Washington and Colorado, the tax laws that have been enacted are sales and excise taxes based on the price of marijuana. What are some of the pros and cons of doing taxation by price?
Price is very easy. You don't have to set up any mechanism to do it. Price is, folks that want to tax potency, they say, well, price is a better proxy for potency because if you buy potent product, the price is high. So that will reflect it. And then the weight base, if you tax by the ounce, that just gives an incentive to producers to make extra potent stuff so that it pushes the market in this strange and distortive way. But on the other side, the reasons not to tax by price are that price fluctuates. It fluctuates with the price of the product. So what you may have is that over time, as the pre-tax price goes down, the tax goes down too, and that may not be what you want. Let me tell. This reminds me of a story of these two friends who disagreed vehemently. They said, "How are we going to resolve our dispute?" And they said, "Well, let's go see the person in our community who a wise and just person, and their community it's the rabbi." They said, "Let's go see the rabbi." So the first person goes to see the rabbi, and the summary of this person's view is too high, and the rabbi listens to this person's story and says, "You're right." The first person goes away. Second friend comes in and tells her story, and rabbi listens and says, her story is summarized as too low, and the rabbi listens and says, "You're right." Now the wife of the rabbi was behind the curtain all this time, and she comes out and said, "Wait a minute, these two friends disagreed completely, and you told each of them "You are right. How can that be?" And the rabbi said, "You're right." But the first person said that marijuana taxes are going to be too high. And at first, what you're seeing in Colorado and Washington is that the black market is still strong and the legal market is having a hard time competing. That they've got not only the taxes but the regulations and getting up to speed and doing everything just right. So the black market is offering a lower price, and it's hard. The supplies are short. Companies are not, new licenses are being issued all the time, and short supply means high prices, and add taxes on top of that, and it's a problem for the legal market. But then later on, as prices come, as costs come down in the legal market's going to get more efficient. They're going to move out the learning curve and develop economies of scale, and the pre-tax price, their costs are going to go down, so the price will go down. And then you say, well, what's wrong with low prices? And some of your listeners will not be bothered at all by low prices. But let me just make a political point, and that is that ultra-low prices to the consumer may have the effect of a federal backlash. That's the kind of thing that could cause some of the 8 points of the Holder memo to be violated. Then you've got a political problem beyond that. Does it get so cheap that the mothers of the jurisdiction start saying, "Wait a minute, this is too cheap"? And is there a political backlash? That's a long answer to a short question. And I haven't even gotten to the real question, which is the percentage of price exacerbates the over time the problem of prices. If you have a percentage of price tax base, well, taxes are too high when you want them to be low at first, and too low later on when it doesn't matter so much. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, I follow you. And, when I had seen these taxation schemes in Colorado and Washington, when I think of a marijuana tax based on price, that would seem to me to influence the government to want to keep the price high. I'd rather bring in 10% of a $200 ounce than 10% of a $20 ounce. And in the case of Oregon and in Alaska, taxing by weight, $35 an ounce in Oregon, $50 an ounce in Alaska, that would seem to me to motivate the government to want to move product, because it doesn't matter what the ounce costs. The more ounces you move, the more tax revenue comes in.
I hear you.
Is there validity to that?
There are certainly ways for government to influence that by regulations and so on.
Very interesting. Now, we also have, at the federal level, a bill was just proposed by my congressman, Representative Earl Blumenauer, and it's kind of a package deal, I think, where, they're saying, let's tax and regulate marijuana like alcohol. So Jared Polis put the regulate part in, and Earl Blumenauer put the tax part in. And his tax is calling for a 10% federal excise tax that would raise to 25% as marijuana legal markets began displacing illegal markets. I wonder if that's too high a tax that might continue to empower these illegal markets.
Wow. In terms of what the market will bear, that is a great question. And I don't know. I mean, that's going to be just on the ground what the market will bear, what consumers will be willing to pay. And you figure, well, the consumer will pay more for something that's in a nice package and been tested and so on, and maybe that's true, or maybe the consumer will remain loyal to the historic dealer that's been helping him all along. So it's not completely clear, but probably the tax product will bear. People pay a little bit more for that. So I think that it's a good idea. I mean, I don't know what the final answer is, but I do like Mr. Blumenauer's approach of having a phase-in of the tax. And I think that, this is the low tax at first. Let it be high later on, but let the industry have a running start with this low tax. So I approve of that. But the same kind of thing has just been introduced in Massachusetts by Representative Rogers and 12. He has got 11 co-sponsors in the Massachusetts House, where he goes by weight, and it's $10 an ounce the first year, $20 an ounce the second year, $35 the third year, and then this is bud again, but $50 an ounce thereafter, and indexed. So it's the concept. I think it's a useful concept of phasing in the rate and starting out low.
Yeah, it seems to me that we might be in a situation where, I've heard people bandying about these ideas of 50% excise taxes. So maybe we're in a situation where 10% is the best
Mr.
offer we get.
Mr. Blumenauer had that. I think in 2013 his bill was 50%, and so this replaces that with a much lower final rate and a phase in too.
Now, is there? You mentioned other possibilities for taxing. We talked about by price and by weight. Is anybody really going forth with taxation by potency or square footage at this point?
Well, that Massachusetts bill, and Dick Evans is you may know Dick was doing a lot of the thinking behind that, does have a potency tax for concentrates. So that Massachusetts bill taxes bud by the ounce and concentrates by grams of THC. And the thinking there is that we can actually measure THC in a liquid. You stick your eyedropper into the vat and pull it out, and everybody says, "Yeah, this is like alcohol." We know with liquor what the proof content is, and the federal government taxes it. They tax 100% 100 proof liquor more than 80 proof liquor, and the thinking is that okay, for concentrates you can do that. Now you have to get it at the liquid stage before it's incorporated into edibles or anything. For bud, the thinking is that any green plant matter. Now, I mean, it's gameable that somebody an expert's going to be able to go in there, and it's like a real estate appraiser. What number do you want? That it's not. People won't really agree, and that's why we don't tax, let me say, cigarettes by tar and nicotine content, because you look at a cigarette, it's not fungible, it's not homogeneous, so people are going to fuss about it. And I think one thing to keep in mind as this industry starts out, that it's probably going to be in the interest of the industry to have clear rules that don't involve a lot of disputes and, even though I'm a lawyer, litigation. And that if everybody can agree, then that's a system that people can live with. Another thing wrong with price is that there are a lot of games people play with price. You were talking about price and weight. And one of them is bundling. Here's a $30 bong and free eighth of marijuana. Well, no tax on that. That's the argument. That doesn't hold up. But people want to play that game. They want to disguise the price. Here's the bus tour. The bus tour is $50, and marijuana is not sold, so you don't have to pay tax on it. That's a gimmick that does, that's litigation. So I'd say keep it clear so people know what the rules are.
Well, Pat Oglesby from newrevenue.org, I want to thank you for joining us again and kind of shedding some light on these tax issues. I know most people aren't too deep into this stuff, and it's really helpful to get an expert to tell us what's going on with this, to give us our options as we move forward on voting for these things. Thank you so much.
My pleasure, Russ. Thank you.
All right.
Keep up the good work.
Thank you very much. Stay tuned, folks. We got a radical rant coming up on the arrogance of politicians who just refuse to accept the will of the people that marijuana ought to be legal. Coming back right after this.
You're tuned into the Russ Belville Show, the voice of the marijuana nation.
420 Radio, freeing your mind 24 hours a day. You know Herb Thrasher from the Herb Thrasher Flower Hour. Now get ready for Herb Age Designs for the proud cannabis consumer. Herb Age Designs, lifestyle gear for the 420 friendly. Herb Age Designs, we've got Frisbee golf discs and durable hemp gear. Herb Age Designs, we've got shot glasses, drinking glasses, coffee mugs, and beer cozies. Check us out on Facebook and online at herbagedesigns.com. And follow Herb Age and Herb Thrasher on Twitter. the interest of fair and balanced journalism, the Russ Belville Show presents the anti-drug public service announcement of the day.
I'm John Bon Jovi, and I've been given a script to talk to you about drugs, rock and roll, having fun, a good time, and all that good stuff. Well, I'll tell you what, drugs is not a part of my everyday routine. It's not everyday fun. It's not good for you. All right, so listen, think twice before you do drugs, because there ain't no winners out there doing it.
This has been the anti-drug public service announcement of the day. To cure this sort of reefer madness, listen to the Russ Belville Show every weekday on 420radio.org. When you are starting up a medical cannabis business, you want a fired-up lawyer who understands the needs of cannabis consumers. The law office of Lauren Vasquez is your fired-up lawyer for the cannabis industry. Visit her website, fireduplawyer.com, or call 1-855-MMJ-LAWS for more information. That's 855-665-5297 for Lauren Vasquez, your fired-up lawyer, or email fireduplawyer@gmail.com.
We must wage what I have called total war against public enemy number one.
I support a change in law to end federal criminal penalties for possession of up to 1 ounce of marijuana.
That marijuana, pot, grass, whatever you want to call it, is probably the most dangerous drug.
Some think there won't be room for them in jail. We'll make room.
I experimented with marijuana a time or two, and I didn't like it, and didn't inhale.
And one major responsibility is to encourage people to use less drugs.
Entirely legitimate topic for debate.
Radical Rant.
What good is a democracy if what the people vote for is ignored? It's a question I've been pondering since Oregon passed its marijuana legalization initiative, Measure 91, with the greatest margin of support for any state that has legalized marijuana, 56.1%. More Oregonians voted for legalized marijuana than voted for any statewide official. Now, the legislature seeks to undo much of what the people approved as the legalization regulations are written. This story begins with the previous general election in 2012. Measure 80, known as the Oregon Cannabis Tax Act, or OCTA, had made the ballot, but went down to defeat at the same time Washington and Colorado were passing their historic marijuana legalization laws. The major newspapers had mostly come out against OCTA. They cited numerous flaws with the proposal, such as allowing for unlimited personal possession and cultivation, and establishing a centralized marijuana commission selected by marijuana growers that would control the wholesale purchase and pricing of all marijuana in Oregon. When OCTA lost, as Washington and Colorado won, political observers explained that the wise electorate had resisted their inclination to legalize marijuana because the details of this particular legalization plan were unwise and unworkable. But the strong showing for legalization in Washington and Colorado lent an air of inevitability to the eventual legalization in Oregon. If not in the 2014 midterm election, then certainly during the 2016 presidential election year. That's when organizers of what would become Measure 91 began engaging the legislature with their ideas of how legalization should unfold in Oregon. The group, New Approach Oregon, explained that they were willing to work with the legislature to craft a legalization plan with their input. Furthermore, the legislature need not have put their political careers at risk by going on the record for or against marijuana legalization. New Approach Oregon asked the legislature to craft a legalization plan and then submit it to the voters as a referendum. The inevitability of legalization acted as a thinly veiled ultimatum. Work with us to create the legalization you'll like, New Approach offered, or we'll gather signatures and place the legalization we like on the ballot, and it will probably win. The legislature refused the offer, so New Approach followed through on its promise. New Approach gathered the requisite number of signatures, the measure made the ballot, and it passed overwhelmingly. 56% of the voters agreed that on July 1st, Adults get to possess 1 ounce of marijuana, 16 ounces of edibles, 72 ounces of tinctures, and 1 ounce of concentrates. Oregonians decided that adults also get to possess 8 ounces of marijuana and cultivate 4 marijuana plants per household. The electorate mandated that only the state can tax marijuana at a low $35 per ounce, and only a vote of the people can ban marijuana commerce in any city or county. Most importantly, the will of the people is that the existing medical marijuana program is not to be affected by passing legalization. Measure 91 made that point in 3 separate sections. Now the legislature is suddenly very interested in writing the details of marijuana legalization. When Washington State passed their Initiative 502, it was safe from legislative tampering for 2 years, thanks to that state's constitutional requirement of a 2/3 legislative majority to override an initiative passed by the people. Colorado's Amendment 64 is in that state's constitution and thus can't be changed without another constitutional amendment. But since Oregon's Measure 91 is neither constitutionally protected nor a constitutional amendment, it is immediately subject to the regulation and amendment that can be passed within the House and Senate. The legislative disdain for the clear intent of the people reached all the way to the governor's office as well. Before he resigned due to an influence scandal involving his fiancée, former Governor Kitzhaber was announcing his set of principles that should guide the implementation of Measure 91. Kitzhaber told the Bend Bulletin, quote, "The amount that you can actually grow at home, at a home grow operation, seems to me to exceed the amount that you're supposed to be able to have legally," end quote. Kitzhaber seemed to be thinking that 4 plants would produce more than 8 ounces, which may be true. But I doubt Kitzhaber was arguing that the home possession limit should be higher. Rather, he was arguing that there should be fewer plants allowed than what was approved by 115,000 more voters than re-elected him. The former governor was also quick to ignore the people on leaving the medical marijuana program untouched, asking, quote, "If you could use marijuana recreationally, why do you even need a separate medical marijuana statute?" End quote. That's a refrain picked up on by members of the legislature who are floating various bills that would in some way merge medical with recreational or eliminate major parts of the medical law altogether. Some of those bills, sadly, are proposed by medical marijuana growers seeking greater profits and less responsibility to care for patients. The lobbyists for the cities and counties, meanwhile, are fighting to allow localities to set their own marijuana taxes, clearly counter to Measure 91's vesting of sole taxation authority within the state. The cities are arguing for the legislature to let stand local taxes that they passed prior to the election, despite Measure 91's clear language repealing and superseding all inconsistent local laws. Those cities and counties also want to be able to ban all marijuana commerce through their councils and boards rather than through Measure 91's required vote of the people. One legislator even floated the idea of increasing Measure 91's typical 1,000-foot buffer between commercial marijuana operations and schools to an entire mile, which would make marijuana commerce impossible in just about every city and town in Oregon. So now the New Approach Oregon campaign is tasked with ensuring that what the people voted for actually becomes law. As the legislature sees it, in 2012, the voters who craved legalization were apparently smart enough to reject the details of OCTA. But in 2014, voters were apparently ignoring the details of New Approach Oregon because they simply craved legalization.
Trust
All right, folks, had a few minutes here at the end of the show after that rant. I wanted to make sure I got that rant in one piece, so I'm going to clip that up and put it up on the internet later today. If you want to catch any of my rants or news reviews or behind the headlines or interviews or drug war data mining or the 420 radio news, all of these are available as clips on my YouTube channel, youtube.com/radicalruss, if you're interested in that kind of stuff. And yeah, this Oregon rant, kind of goes along with the Washington, D.C. legislators who are now, saying that marijuana legalization can't be enacted, even though the people have already enacted it. It goes along with the responses we're seeing in Washington State, in Colorado, where these legislators just can't seem to accept that the people are way ahead of them on the issue of marijuana legalization. And when we pass these initiatives, I'm hopeful that people will start to understand that, if they don't stand up for those of us in the marijuana community and these initiatives, they're going to see the same kind of shenanigans when their initiatives are passed. If it's GMO labeling or if it's a handgun measure or whatever it might be, what good is it to have an initiative system if the legislature can just undo anything that you've passed by initiative? This reminds me of a story I reported from Missouri. I think it was Columbia, Missouri, where they had passed a decrim measure at the city level, and then the city passed a repeal of their decrim measure. So the activists put together an initiative to repeal the repeal, and then the city council did a repeal of the repeal of the repeal. And there was no mechanism by which these city people could appeal this situation. They were just stuck in an endless loop. And I worry that that's a situation we might end up with here in Oregon, where we pass this marijuana legalization and we say only the state can tax it, and then the cities just ignore that and pass their own marijuana taxes. That sort of precedent cannot be allowed to stand. And I'm hoping people that aren't into marijuana or marijuana politics recognize that this is harmful to our democracy. The subject of it is irrelevant. Whether or not we're talking about a marijuana initiative is irrelevant. People should be up in arms now about the fact that we passed an initiative and the legislature is looking to gut it. They're looking to change it into what they want it to be. And that's just so much more frustrating when you know that backstory. When you know that New Approach Oregon made every good faith effort they could to try to get the legislature to work with them. They reached out and went to behind closed doors and made coalitions and extracted promises and got people to understand that, hey, legislature, legalization's coming. You can get on this train. You can craft a legalization that you can live with. We can work together on this. I've never seen such open cooperation between a state legislature and a marijuana legalization organization. And they punted on it. If they punted on it, they gave up their right to complain about it. They didn't believe we could get it on the ballot and pass it in a non-presidential election year, and they bet wrong. And these elections have consequences, and these elected officials need to understand that I'm going to hold them accountable, and other people are going to hold them accountable, and make the electorate understand that you can't trust this person with our democracy. You can't trust this elected official with our democracy if they're just going to ignore what the people vote for. If we're just going to leave everything up to the legislature, hell, we might as well be Tennessee. We might as well be Mississippi. We might as well be some state. Actually, I think Mississippi has initiatives. But we might as well be one of those 24 states that don't have initiatives if the point of the initiative isn't going to be respected. I would seriously ask for political campaigners on both sides of the spectrum, left and right, to band together in Oregon and work for an initiative to protect initiatives. Set up a situation like Washington State, where if an initiative is passed by the people, it takes a 2/3 majority of the legislature to alter it within the first 2 years. Without such a protection, the initiative system is just ripe for abuse by our elected officials who don't trust us, who don't believe we're adults who know what the hell we're doing. That's all the time we got for Hour 1, but stay tuned for Hour 2. Toker Talk Radio's coming up next. Mama Juana's in the studio. She's about to head out to Atlanta if they let her. They're shutting down all the airports, apparently. Weather sucks all over this country. For everyone here at Roland J Studios, I'm Radical Russ. Until next time, take care of each other, tokers.
This is the Russ Belville Show. The Russ Belville Show is blogging and podcasting daily at radicalruss.com.